A federal judge in Oregon just did something that in my 30 years as a federal prosecutor I almost never saw happen. He stripped the United States Department of Justice of the presumption of regularity, the legal benefit of the doubt the government almost always gets. He also dismissed DOJ's entire case for lack of legal merit. Why? Because the judge warned that DOJ's nationwide lawsuits demanding sensitive voter data amount to overreach and raised concerns about how that information might be used across the country. The case involved the state of Oregon. DOJ sued Oregon seeking access to sensitive voter registration information, data DOJ says it needs to enforce federal voting rights laws and ensure states are properly maintaining accurate voter rolls. Oregon resisted, arguing federal law did not authorize such sweeping disclosure and that releasing such information would raise serious privacy concerns. The case landed in front of U.S. District Judge Mustafa Kasubai, and the dispute in Oregon isn't unique. DOJ's lawsuit was part of a broader nationwide legal push to obtain full, unredacted voter registration data, often including birth dates, driver's license numbers, and partial social security numbers. In fact, DOJ made similar demands on nearly every state in the country, and sued roughly 24 states and the District of Columbia when they declined to provide the information. Some states, including Texas, Indiana, and South Dakota, did comply, sometimes under confidential memoranda spelling out how DOJ said the data would be used, while many others refused and were sued. To understand why this ruling matters, you need to know about what lawyers call the presumption of regularity. It's a doctrine under which courts normally assume executive branch officials act lawfully and follow proper procedures, placing a heavy burden on challengers to present clear evidence before judges question the government's motives. Judges rarely withhold it. It reflects DOJ's institutional reputation and separation of powers concerns. But skepticism wasn't the only reason why the case in Oregon collapsed. The court didn't just criticize DOJ's posture, it dismissed the lawsuit on the merits. Judge Kasubai concluded that none of the federal statutes DOJ relied on entitled it to the unredacted voter data it demanded from Oregon. He added that DOJ's conduct in seeking those records was, in his words, raising suspicion about the purposes for which it seeks statewide unredacted voter registration lists. Under the National Voter Registration Act, the judge said states may redact sensitive personal information and DOJ has no special exemption to demand birth dates, driver's license numbers, or social security digits. He held that the Help America Vote Act lets DOJ enforce election standards but does not authorize sweeping document demands at all. And DOJ's Civil Rights Act demand letter failed, he said, because it didn't spell out the concrete factual basis for believing Oregon had violated federal voting law. The judge also grounded his ruling in federalism, the constitutional structure that generally leaves the nuts and bolts of running elections to the states unless Congress clearly says otherwise. He emphasized that the Constitution leaves election administration primarily to the states and that Congress only has limited power to override that structure. DOJ's claims here, he wrote, amounted to an overreach and a misuse of those narrow constitutional exceptions, one that disturbed the balance between state and federal authority over elections. Oregon law independently bars disclosure of that sensitive data, and the judge concluded DOJ failed to show federal law overrides those protections. The case was dismissed without leave to amend, meaning the court saw the defects as incurable. The judge then explained why DOJ didn't even get its usual presumption of good faith. He focused on a letter from Attorney General Pam Bondi to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. In it, DOJ pressed Minnesota to cooperate with federal demands for statewide voter registration records. But the same letter also raised immigration enforcement priorities, federal-state cooperation with ICE, and Minnesota's immigration policies. The judge in Oregon emphasized that those two subjects, voter data demands and immigration enforcement, appeared together in the letter. To the court, bundling those unrelated powers suggested DOJ was exerting cross-issue leverage rather than acting solely as a neutral election law enforcer. He went further. The judge cited DOJ's statements about creating a nationwide database of confidential voter information and possibly using it in immigration enforcement, calling that prospect chilling. He warned that using voter registration data that way, without congressional authorization, could discourage voter participation and lead to an erosion of voting rights. DOJ's own words and actions created enough doubt that the department did not receive its usual benefit of the doubt. This is rare. Federal judges almost never deny the Justice Department the presumption of good faith, the presumption of regularity. Here, the court didn't just express concern, it dismissed the case, accused DOJ of overreach, and warned that its conduct could chill voter participation. And because DOJ has brought similar lawsuits across the country, the reasoning behind this ruling may apply far beyond Oregon. The case raises serious questions about the legal viability of DOJ's voter data lawsuits, and signals that courts will continue to scrutinize DOJ's actions in cases going forward.